F-Stämma. No further west, Clinic, no further.
F19 on you.
Hooker, skank, tramp, prostitute, call girl, trick, and whore. These are some of the names for the women who struggle to survive out on the stroll every night. In Victoria, as with all other major cities in Canada, the sex industry thrives in the shadows. As a super cool team, we began this project thinking we understood prostitution and the sex trade industry, only to find out that like the rest of society, we really had no idea.
First of all, know that they probably don't know anything about it.
One of the other myths around sex work too is that sex work is not just about intercourse, it's about all types of things. It's about the girlfriend experience, it's about companionship, it's about just experimentation, it's about alternative sexual fantasies, all these things. So it's more than just about let's have sex and then walk out.
Not only did we find that most people have false assumptions about what sex trade involves, but lots of citizens believe that prostitution is illegal. Is it really?
Well, how does it work? Because prostitution is not illegal in Canada. Mm-hmm. Basically what it comes down to is talking about prostitution is illegal. So you can't have a discussion with a potential client about exchanging money for sexual services.
Marketing of it is illegal. The income itself is criminalized, right? Living off the avails is a law that is in theory about busting pimps, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality it criminalizes the income of sex workers. So the income is criminal. The location where you actually do, the workplace is criminal. Mm-hmm. And as we found out, even talking about it is a challenge, right?
Let's say I'm going to hire an accountant to do my books, okay? So the accountant is free to do my books, okay? But we can't negotiate what the accountant is going to do and for what price. That's how it is in Canada. The sex worker is free to do the act itself, but she can't negotiate her price or the services that are going to be provided.
So it allows prostitution to exist for the buyers, but it criminalizes everything about it for the seller.
Is this ethical? Are Victoria's sex workers being treated fairly? The bottom line is that society pays for sex. So why are we punishing the people who provide this sought-out service?
The stigma is around thinking we know what the problem is, right? And it's around blame and morality. People make a morality judgment about sex at work, unlike any other job. Mm-hmm. You know, like you don't make a morality judgment about the guy who picks up the recycling bin, right? Like that's a job. You just think that's a job. I don't think he's a good man or a bad man for doing that. I don't think he's got a moral weakness that he's chosen to work in recycling. There is no other line of work other than maybe drug dealing that we look at that way.
The sex workers are more likely on the street, are more likely to be the brunt of public, kind of aggression and targeted, more obvious targeting. And the stigma is so intense, so strong, that you need a long time in a society to change it. We do know it can be changed or reduced, but it's only when you give a lot more rights to the individuals and they can get together in groups and try to mobilize and change public view, then you'll probably have a reduced stigma.
A lot of people don't want to identify as a sex trade worker. So we have the numbers based on who accesses our services. Mm-hmm. What we see on the stroll is 10% of the sex work that actually goes on. The rest of it happens behind closed doors.
The street-based work is only about 15 to 20% of the industry. So it's a small segment of the industry, which is a myth usually. Like, people assume that the street-based that's what the industry is. Mm-hmm.
There's a need for the industry, just like we discovered, there's a need for the industry to be completely invisible. If it puts its head up in any way, mm-hmm. then police, and then the public notices, then they say to police, it's against the law. What's this doing here?
In our attempt to investigate this issue, the Victoria Police Department and all surrounding police departments refused to address the issue once we wanted to criticize the specifics of these convoluted laws. So if policymakers won't discuss this issue, how are people's attitudes going to change?
Well, I actually think that sex prostitution should be decriminalized. It would give them rights of any other worker in our society. So right now, sex workers have no rights because it's assumed it doesn't exist. And there's no, in fact, they don't even have the right of a civilian has in regard to police protection. And it's because the police are in this ambivalent situation of whether to charge them for breaking the criminal code versus protecting them for being harmed by someone else.
There's a distinct difference between decriminalization and legalization, which is a myth. Like a lot of people assume when you say decriminalization that you're assuming legalization, and they're actually two completely different legal frameworks. So that's one of the things that needs to be more addressed. All of these things were changed by repealing the laws, and these things can happen not only by legalizing it. A lot of people think that it's only through legalization that you can foster a safe-sex industry, but it's also through decriminalization, and actually there's the responsibility is more widespread than just the worker.
Well, the trouble with that is we'll never change the laws as long as people have these attitudes, so it's kind of one of those, you know, I don't know, what would we do? I think here'd be my dream sequence. The Supreme Court of Canada would overthrow those laws based on them being just totally ridiculous and discriminatory and causing more problems than they actually solve. And there are some court challenges underway, so that's potential. So I think the laws would be, I'd like to see the laws just thrown out at a court level, and then Canada would be forced into a discussion about this and would have to do something.
Well, and the thing is, sex workers are more apt to go for help if they have had a violent attack or whatever, because they don't have a fear anymore of getting arrested.
You know, and criminalizing it is not going to, it's not ever going to go away. It's not going to go away. And there's a lot of women that are in sex work because this is what they choose to do for a living. Right? So making it criminal is really nonsensical. And it's always, there's always going to be patrons. There's always going to be people accessing sex work services. So why?
Sex workers are open for business every day, and as long as there are buyers, there will be sellers.
I'm coming up only to hold you under, and coming up only to show you wrong.
We can either ignore this issue and continue to hold false assumptions and judgments. Or we can accept that sex work isn't going away and that these women are real people. If sex work is decriminalized, human rights for these workers will improve, and the stigma surrounding this industry can start to fade.
Don't forget that we're somebody's daughter, we're somebody's sister, we're somebody's mother quite often, you know, and none of us raised our hand in grade 1 and went, I want to be a junkie hoe when I grow up.